It's a long, hard pull to the next payday. It's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, John. Oh.
On February 26, 2015, the FCC passed something called the Open Internet Order. You may recognize it by its street name, Net Neutrality. But what is this exactly? What did the FCC approve? Does it matter? And if so, why does it matter to you? Why does it matter to big businesses? Why would it matter to the government? Luckily, we were able to ask our tech guru, Jonathan Strickland of Forward Thinking, Tech Stuff, and several other shows to drop by with us and let us know what's really going on with net neutrality.
Who are you talking to?
You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. Okay, Jonathan, first things first, what is net neutrality?
All right, well, net neutrality in a broad sense is this philosophy that has several facets to it. One is that we should be able to connect to the internet using any internet-capable device at our disposal and be able to access everything that is lawfully allowed on the internet. So in other words, whether I'm using a computer or a phone or a console or a smart TV, I should be able to access everything equally. There should not be any kind of provider that can block one type of device versus another. And it also means I should be able to access all that information with an equal amount of access. So if I were to subscribe to a video service, for example, but my internet service provider offers a competing video service, I should be able to still access the one I want and not have my ISP impede that traffic in any way. It should all get to me equally, and that's the ideal situation of net neutrality.
That practice specifically is what people refer to when they talk about throttling.
Yeah, so the idea of throttling or creating different lanes of traffic where you would pay to get a faster lane than average traffic, all of that is what's being referred to there. And as far as the consumer goes, we may still see faster traffic lanes being offered under tiers, so I could pay to have faster access. But as a providers should not have to be charged more to send things faster.
Okay, I see. So a video service shouldn't have to pay, under net neutrality, shouldn't have to pay more to an ISP in order to have comparable service to other providers.
Right. There's still some tricky parts here. There are things like transition fees. There's the idea of interconnectivity where one network connects to another network. The ISPs are the last mile. That's the part that gets to your house or your apartment or wherever you're living. That often has some sort of network relationship with providers, and there's an interconnection fee for the data to go across. It's all about peering. Now, peering, usually people say, if you carry my traffic, I'll carry your traffic and we're square.
Okay.
But if you're a large provider like a video service like Netflix, you're pushing a lot more content out than you're taking on, and that's when you get people saying, technically I'm going to charge you for this service that you're trying to get all this traffic onto my network.
So that is net neutrality in a nutshell and a couple of the issues. What exactly is this open internet order? What did the FCC actually pass?
That's an excellent question that I cannot answer because there are 300 pages of rules that the FCC have come up with, and they have not yet, as of the time we're having this conversation, been published. However, in general, what the FCC has said is we want there to be this open internet. However, we also don't want to put all the different parts of Title II classification and apply it to broadband. We're going to forbear or waive certain elements of that classification.
Now this brings us to a fascinating point, Jonathan. Title II. A lot of our viewers are hearing this being tossed around in the news, but not a real concrete explanation of what it is, or relating to a very funny thing you said to me earlier off the air. how is the internet like a railroad?
It's an excellent question. Now, the reason why you ask that is because in the late 19th century, the United States Congress passed an act to regulate the railroads. And here's why. They didn't want railroad companies to be able to charge different corporations or passengers different rates just based upon who they were. So for example, let's say I'm running a railroad company and I make a deal with a steel company. And the steel company wants me to carry their cargo and I'm going to cut them a great rate, but I'm also going to charge the steel company's competitors twice as much.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm the only game in town, right? I'm the only one running a railroad there. Mm-hmm. The government said we need to regulate this to make sure that everyone has a fair shake. The railroads are too important for this kind of activity to go on. They became common carriers, which has some certain rules to it, like as long as there's capacity on the train, as long as you have the fee for transportation, and as long as the railroad doesn't have any reasonable justification for preventing you from getting on the train, you are allowed to ride that train. So when the telephone and telegraph companies came up, they started to look at the system and say, this is also something we desperately need in the United States. We need this communications network to grow, but we need to have rules in place so that one dominant player doesn't immediately dictate everything that happens to everyone else, because not all of these networks were compatible with one another in the early days. So if you got out there first, you had the advantage because you could make your system so robust, everyone else wants to connect to you. But if they're not compatible, you just push them out of the business. And that is where we ended up seeing the same basic rules applied to railroads get applied to telephone and telegraph systems, and later on to data systems. And this was over a course of several different acts passed in Congress, like the 1934 Communications Act, the 1996-97 Telecommunications Act. These are all based on that same principle of we want fairness so that people can actually access these services.
All right, so you know what I'm going to ask you next. Is there any stuff they don't want you to know about this open internet order ruling?
That's a great question, and it all depends upon what side of the debate you are on and whom you are asking. So there are those who support open internet. You may know the FCC voted 3-2 on this issue. So you have 3 members of the FCC saying yes and 2 saying no. So depending upon which ones you ask, you're going to get very different answers. With the 3, you're going to hear things like, this is going to allow people to get the access they want, the actual broadband access they need. It's going to make certain there's a fair playing ground. It's going to create more competition. With those against, they're going to say, this is going to decrease innovation and investment in infrastructure because of regulations imposed on it. It's also going to be the introduction of government intervention and perhaps even disruption of business due to regulations. Without reading all 300 pages, I obviously can't give a fully informed opinion, but depending on which side you ask, you're going to get a very different answer.
Yeah, it seems as though people who are on, let's say, the pro-business side are saying that their opponents are advocates of big government.
Right.
And people who are proponents of the current net neutrality bill or open internet order, whatever that might be, which we should get to, they say that this is a battle of the common man against big business, right? So there's some interesting things to unpack there, but first, we have to establish something that's been going around online since the ruling on February 26th. This open internet order is not currently accessible by the public. This is making some rumors spread. Could you tell us what's going on?
Sure. The big rumor is that this agreement was reached in secret and it was all behind closed doors. This is the way the FCC works. When they have a proposed rule, they then hold a forum where they ask for public comment, which they did. And they got thousands, hundreds of thousands of comments on the subject of net neutrality, both for and against, at least for or against the reclassification of broadband as a Title II. So they did what they were supposed to do then, and then they went into deliberations. They ended up creating these rules, but this is exactly what the FCC does. They make the rules, then they publish the rules, and at that point we can read them. It's not like this was specifically done as a special behind closed doors meeting. This is just the process the FCC has to go through because of the way the FCC was formed. They're following their rules.
So this is just par for the course.
Exactly. So while it is frustrating that we haven't had a chance to read the rules as of yet, it's not like this was an unusual circumstance where they just said, let's all do this hush hush, and everyone's going to think that we're supporting net neutrality, but they don't know we're really going to get our hands deep into business and rip it apart.
So given that we already have some of these concerns in the public mind, what would you say, just in your opinion, is there any sand to the concept of corruption between the private and public spheres here?
I mean, there's always concern, and it is our duty as citizens to keep an eye on what is happening. But at the same time, I would argue that regulation does not immediately squash innovation or investment in infrastructure. In fact, I think that regulation is going to allow other players that traditionally could not truly compete in the space, like Google, to come in and create real competition. And when you have competition, that gives you the incentive to make that innovation and those investments in infrastructure, or else you get left behind. In my view, it's a lack of competition that often results in no innovation or investment in infrastructure. And look at the United States. Most people have access to maybe 2 broadband providers that are at a significant level. Some only have access to 1. And when you don't have that kind of competition, when you don't have Google breathing down your neck, there's not a lot of reason, not a lot of incentive for you to make a better product for your customers. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I also want to read those rules.
What should our audience be paying attention to regarding net neutrality in the next few months?
Will other entities that traditionally have not competed in this space actually be able to move into more markets? Because if it does, that's the best thing for consumers. And I think the other thing is to keep an eye on a related issue where the FCC voted to overturn state laws that prevented municipalities from expanding their Wi-Fi offering to citizens. Because on the one hand, it's to counteract this lack of competition. On the other hand, it's the federal government overruling state law, which is tricky to say the least.
That's a great point, and let's end on that note for our viewers. Jonathan, again, thank you so much for coming on. People can find you on Tech Stuff, Forward Thinking, Brain Stuff, Stuff of Genius. You do a lot of things. And listeners, thank you for watching. Let us know what you think about the future of the internet. Is this net neutrality a win for the common people or a threat on the side of big government? Let Matt, Jonathan, and I know in the comments below. Like this video, share with your friends if you want them to learn more about net neutrality. And as always, stay tuned for more stuff they don't want you to know. If you have suggestions or questions, we'd love to hear them. Our address is conspiracy@howstuffworks.com. Good job. I think that went well.
Sure. So we're going to do that again with the cameras, right?
Jonathan,
Yeah.
there are cameras everywhere.